Hey everyone, Mr. Happy here, and I am so excited to make this video. Last month, I had the opportunity to fly
Fighting
all the
wolves.
way to London
Just
to try
like
out Final
The Witcher
Fantasy
3.
16.
Perfect.
Thank you, Square, for taking me across the world on my first trip to Europe to play Final Fantasy 16 inside the Tower of London. That sounds like fiction. But as much as I want to tell
That's
you about
crazy.
the trip to London itself, I know you clicked on this video to hear my thoughts on Final Fantasy 16 after actually playing.
Honestly, I would like to hear about the trip to London. I've been to London for 2 days of my whole entire life, and I was impressed both of the days I was there. But anyways, let's watch. I guess we're here for Final Fantasy 16. So I like that you're fighting wolves, just like Geralt would do. This is perfect. Great start.
Playing it. Don't worry, no spoilers at all. Pretty sure Square would track me down if I did. And also, one disclaimer, it'll be at the bottom of the video, but content shown on the screen are from a special version made for media.
Look, so sick, heal, and ravage. These are like you can like tell your dog what to do. Here, look at that. Like this is probably before you have. Oh no, you do have the Phoenix stuff right here. I don't know. Yeah, that's interesting. So like on like the D-pad, you can tell your dog, give him controls. That's super cool.
To experience, and contents may differ from the final version. So with that, let's get to it. For our gameplay preview, we actually had a lot of options to explore. The first was Clive in his youth, including tutorials and introductions to gameplay systems.
This is always like they always show you fighting one of these things. This is like a really good. The dog can heal, a healer pet. Oh, he actually it probably can heal. But you always, so in Crystal Chronicles, I remember you fought this thing in like the trailers to Final Fantasy 14. You fight this thing in like every Final Fantasy like demo or trailer.
I felt that the tutorials were short and effective, something I'm especially thankful for nowadays. Being an action game, I just want to learn something, get to try it, learn something, get to try it, and rinse and repeat. Just keeps the game flowing smoothly, and these early sections did go as such. Despite not having many abilities, though, they didn't shy away from the large or epic battles while also ensuring to include small, personal-feeling battles. There are fights with lots of enemies, fights with large enemies, and a constant need to reevaluate how I want to use the skills I was given and learned. The UI was quick and easy to navigate, and little details such as the save menu having the 2D sprite versions of the characters in the party at the time were thoroughly welcome. And without spoiling anything, the characters and their voice work here are all top notch. I already knew I loved Cid's gravelly whimsy in his voice and Benedicta's menacing coldness in her voice from the trailers, but in conversation, these elements are really given time to shine. Sentence to sentence, the characters flow freely in such a way I couldn't help but be pulled into their words. I also had the privilege of meeting some of the voice actors. Susanna Fielding, who plays Jill, David Menken, who plays Barnabas, Nina Indis, who plays Benedicta, and Ben Starr, who plays Clive. All were wonderful people who indulged the fans and press alike. Ben especially seemed excited, meeting every request and even popping into a live stream to say hi after the event. Thank you, Ben, and looking forward to your performance as Clive. I've also included socials for all the voice actors in case any of you are just unaware of who's actually voicing who, so go ahead and follow them on socials. Now, as I played through, I was guided through.
I'm not gonna creep on them on social media. That's weird. I just if they're good at voice acting, that's great. I don't need to follow them on Instagram.
A largely linear experience. I was able to go from stage to stage, as Yoshida calls them, where you enter a stage at a start point and gradually progress through the area to the end point before going back to the map to select the next stage. There are items hidden slightly off the beaten path, but these missions are designed to be more focused and less open. Now, once I got to play through a section of the game when Clive was young, they also let us play a section of the game where Clive is in his 20s, which I believe is what we've been seeing for the most part in the previews. Some of the stuff we got to play is also some of the stuff that we've seen in the previews, including a stop-off in the hideaway. If you've been keeping up with the news, it basically functions as a hub with all sorts of functions: side quests, lore, shops, upgrades, training options to practice Clive's skill, and we've seen some other functions and features from the hideaway in the various previews that I did not get to experience. Things such as the arcade mode and some other mystery function we've yet to be told about yet. Curious to find out what that is. In this section with Clive being older, I also got
mystery function that we've yet to learn about. Okay, so I have theories. My one theory is, well, so my one theory is that I think they're gonna let you fight like an arcade battle mode for Final Fantasy 16, like for the different espers, sort of the icons. So like I think it's going to be like Street Fighter in the game. I think they're going to have a mode where you can play as each of the icons and you can unlock them. And you can just like play like 2v2, like, or I mean like 1v1 with like a friend, like a fighting game, like a Dragon Ball Z Budokai. That's my prediction. I probably won't be true, but that would be so cool. I could see them having DLC and like making a whole like fighting game within the game. Like why not, right? Like they're gonna have like an arcade like battle mode where they you like an endless battler, you know, kind of like Palace of the Dead. They're gonna have a mode like that. They confirmed it. Like that's like an arcadey, like totally like out of left field mode that they're gonna add into the game. I think they're gonna add a fighting game into the game, and they're gonna sell DLC where you can purchase different icons, and it's going to be a fighting game within Final Fantasy. I know that's crazy. That's my prediction. Also, welcome everyone. What's going on? Yeah, we're going to see some Final Fantasy 16 first impressions. People got like the first 4 hours of the game, or I don't think it's the first 4 hours, but they got to play like 4 hours of the game from different select parts of the game. Rock'em Sock'em icons. Yeah, exactly.
Got to experience some of the other gameplay elements that weren't available when I got to play Clive in his youth. One of the big ones was Torgal himself, who I absolutely adore, not just because he's a cute puppers, but because he is so functional in the gameplay. The biggest thing that he can do is that he is capable of launching enemies into the air or slamming them down, and that can be done pretty much on command, so you can use him to really extend the combos and really feel like not just an ally, but an extension of Clive himself. Now, he does also have other functions. He can do basic attacks, which he can use to juggle enemies or just pressure them, and he can even heal health that you recently took damage. So
he can heal
if you lost health.
Confirmed here. The dog can heal 2 different kind of ways.
Recently, he can slowly heal that value if you just need a little bit of health and you don't want to use your items just yet and you think you can avoid getting hit. So Torgal feeling like an extension of Clive on top of all the other skills that we had already been introduced to was something I really got to enjoy when we played through the stages with Clive in his 20s.
This is cool.
And it didn't stop there. We were also allowed to explore one of the field areas. Now, in these, you're given more free reign to run around and complete as few or as many objectives as possible. It's the most open feeling section of the game. Okay. I wasn't able to do much in this zone, especially with the limited time only having 1 day, but there were still encounters of varying difficulty.
I will say I'm like a little bit nervous, like from a lot of the footage that I've seen. It does seem like there's a lot of like empty space. I don't know. Like I don't know that. I don't know that for sure, but like I just have the world does not feel insanely populated to me. I'm not sure if that's going to be a problem or not though. Like I don't know if that's a problem, but it's just something I've been kind of noticing that it's like you don't see a lot of like NPCs, it seems like, or just like interesting things like running around.
The area is clearly designed to be part of potential side quests or hunts, and the ability to experiment with Clive's various abilities and skill sets while farming monster drops for what would equate to upgrades in the full game. Curious to see how frequently time is spent in these types of areas when completing side quests and hunts later, but either way, it was just fun to run around and just play as Clive. That's one of the biggest highlights of the game, and this was the perfect place to do it. We were even given the choice of playing the section of the game from the February footage drop, you know, where they were playing through the castle with Benedicta and the Garuda fight and all that stuff, which I gladly did. This had the most skills available of all the gameplay previews, and thus was the section I had the most fun with. I can't express, although I'll have to figure out how exciting it was to jump from the other preview sections to this, seeing just how different the level of depth was with just a few extra things available.
Yeah, Tess, I don't know that I'm saying that it's a problem, that it's really wide open, but it's just something that I've noticed. I mean, I remember like playing like The Witcher 3. If you go 30 seconds in like any direction, you like run into something, you know, whether it's like like a side quest thing, whether it's like some kind of an item, whether it's like some kind of monster like nest. And it made the world like there was still space, you know, where there was like not things, but it's like it made the world feel really lived in. And I think if you just like walk from like one road to another road and there's just not really anything to explore or find there, I think that is a problem. But I'm trying to think of when it wouldn't be a problem. I'm trying. I mean, maybe I do just think it's a problem if it's a little bit too empty. But I guess I will say I don't know that it is too empty. I don't know that it is too empty. I've just I haven't noticed like a lot of things in the space of the game that they've showed so far.
Now for the gameplay itself. I've talked a lot about how much I loved playing it, but I haven't spoken much about the gameplay. But all you need to know is it is everything I wanted from this gameplay style. Coming from combat director Ryota Suzuki, known best for his work on various very high-profile Capcom games, the man is a master of his art, and here is no different. I'll be doing a deep dive on the customization, choices based on gameplay style, and more in a separate video. However, I wanted to comment a little bit on it here, and I found the gameplay fast and fluid with lots of room for personal expression in both skill and style. In other games in the same genre, it's more accepted that you'll access, or at least attempt to access, most, if not all of your options simultaneously in order to bring this pre-created playable character to their absolute peak. Clive felt much more like a product of choice. Icons all have very distinct aspects that can not only help you define your own playstyle, but they also ensure to bring something that assists the other icons in their own unique ways. We only had access to Phoenix, Garuda, and Titan, but these three felt like a match made in heaven as is, so I can't wait to experiment with the rest of them in the full game. However, there's one aspect in particular I didn't expect to want to talk about so much, and that's actually the stagger mechanic. Now, if you've been keeping up with
so they said like the first ones, like Garuda, was it Garuda, Phoenix, and Titan, or Ifrit, Garuda, I forget which ones he said, but they said that like the first ones work really well. That's good to hear that the first ones work really well. I'm interested in like it would be interesting. I'm interested in knowing if like you can just get through the whole games on just those ones, or if like, and if like maybe because those are like the ones that you spend the most time with, they spent the most time making them. It'd be interesting to know like if like the gameplay can really change up like really like a lot, like in like late game getting different icons. I think there's 7 of them that you can get. Somewhere around there. I just wonder. So I wonder if there's 7 different stances, 7 different icons, and if they change up the battle like enough that they feel like they're different later on in the game. That like, you know, maybe 20 hours in the game you get like the last one, and you say, "Hey, I like this one," and it like changes how you play. I don't know. It's interesting. It's just all speculation there. But yeah, he's about to talk about like stance breaking, which makes so much sense. Final Fantasy VII is all about stance breaking too. You know, like the like getting like their is it stance like a stamina. You guys know what I'm saying. But a lot of like Honkai Star Rail does that. Like whatchamacallit, Persona does that. A lot of like turn-based games do that. What's that other, like Octopath Traveler does that. It seems like a really big thing, like to keep like battles, like it seems like a way to like let you feel like you've earned to just wail on someone and do a lot of damage and like end a battle quickly. Yeah, like a stagger bar. But like, because like sometimes like battles can just take so long, and it's like it's basically just like, hey, once you get like the stagger thing down, you can do a whole chunk of damage. You just have to survive till you get to like a stagger, then you get like a big payoff. I don't think I dislike that. It's just something that I've kind of noticed is like really trendy these days. Like stagger bars are super big in a lot of RPGs these days. I feel like I wouldn't be surprised if like Tears of the Kingdom had one. I don't know if they do or not, but it just seems like a lot of games are doing like their version of that. And Final Fantasy always kind of has had that kind of stuff. At least they have it in Final Fantasy VII and other stuff. But anyways,
with other Square Enix projects, the stagger mechanic isn't really that new of a thing.
Yeah,
Final Fantasy 13 and its sequels, as well as Final Fantasy 7 Remake, all use some variation of the stagger mechanic. Basically, by damaging opponents, you can eventually stagger them, and that opens up a window where they're punching bags for your various skills. They do have a mini stagger about halfway through the bar that knocks them off balance and interrupts any skills for a brief moment, which is also a time that you can specifically use Garuda to pull them down and then open them up to even more attacks. While staggered, though, they take greatly increased damage, and the value increases as you combo their helpless bodies. Now, the reason why I didn't expect to talk about that is, again, it's kind of just self-explanatory. You'll hit enemies and they'll stagger, and then you'll, just do as much damage as you possibly can. And it's that common sensibility that I think is the reason why I want to talk about it, because it's not so common a sensibility here in the way that it functionally works inside of combat. So, for the most basic enemies, honestly, they're fodder for your stronger skills. I feel like in a lot of the previews you've probably seen for gameplay, including the B-roll I'm using here, which is not me playing, by the way. This is just like stock footage we were given to use in order to express our points to you. It feels like they're kind of just deliberately doing less damage in a lot of these. And it's not even like they're...
I gotta say, that is very smart of them to say, hey, instead of letting all you game journalists and YouTubers make our game look stupid, here's some footage of someone that knows how to playing it, and here, you guys can play it, but you ain't taking this footage home with you. You can have this this nice reel that we put together. We'll give you a USB drive later.
Playing poorly, it's just like the damage values are tuned down, so you can kind of see Clive's style on things. But when you use your iconic abilities on the easier enemies, the ones that are not meant to be like super long fights or take a while, you can obliterate things. And it is so fun running through, finding a pack that has a bunch of enemies, doing something to round them up, and obliterating them. And because the abilities still recharge when out of combat, I found it so much fun to just bash and brutalize every pack with everything in my arsenal.
I'm really happy that he just said that the HP or that the damage was like reduced a bit in this what they're showing right here, or that maybe the enemy's HP is like boosted up, which is great because it does feel like very, very spongy. I kind of don't like mobs that are just like take forever to kill. It's just, I don't like that. Like, it's just like a waste of time if you just like, I need to hit something like a bajillion times. Like Assassin's Creed did that, where it's like you had to hit someone like 9 times with the sword to kill him, and it's just like, dude, it's just, come on, like, ugh.
Basically, at some points, coming up with like rotations, like, okay, so on this pack, I'm going to do this, and then on the next pack, I'll use these skills, and then by then, the first skills will be back, and then I only had to, shake that up when there would be bigger, stronger enemies. And there are like those. In a lot of these packs that do have a lot of trash mobs, there's usually like a larger enemy somewhere in that pack, deals more damage, doesn't exactly get interrupted by any of your skills, and so then I had to dial back and play a bit more strategically. I would usually try to make sure that I was removing stagger bar from that bigger enemy while making sure the more, easy to kill enemies were nearby, because then they just become incidental. You can just knock them out and it's not much of a problem at all. But then when bosses came around, I actually had to really reevaluate the way that I wanted to play the stagger bar. I feel like, again, the way that my brain initially thought of doing it just doesn't really play out that way when it comes to the practicality of actually doing the fights. But as for the bosses themselves, without speaking too much about any particular details, every single one had a different feel, a different means of playing against them, and I had to pay attention to very different things. It also helps, again, that there are bosses that are, that are like Clive's size, and then there's also bosses that are massive, and the types of skills you can effectively use and utilize against them does change significantly. So it made me already think like, well, if I had other icons, would I be playing this fight any differently? And honestly, the answer is yes, just from what we've seen from the previews versus what I got to actually play. So I think what most
dude, then you know what that means is that like so New Game Plus is going to be off the chain, dude. So if you do like New Game Plus on hard mode and then you start with all of the icons, what if it lets you do that? Then you can redo some of the earlier battles that you did where you only had like 1 or 2 icons. You redo them with like any of the icons that you have if you get to do New Game Plus and keep everything. I hope you do, because like I hope there's like enough ways to like play and to battle like different bosses that it's like that like that's rewarding, like there's like just replayability there. Like when I was a fan of Dynasty Warriors games, when you're just mowing through hundreds of non-heroic characters, but then name generals were actually tough fights. Oh yeah. Dynasty Warriors, man, that's bringing me back.
People are gonna default to is they're gonna want to save all their biggest hitting skills for when bosses are staggered. And I did try to do that to some capacity, but the speed at which you can reach these points definitely encourages you to use abilities in order to actually stagger the enemy. And that sounds like common sense, but so does trying to save every ability for when something is staggered, because you don't have a lot of time to deal that damage once they're staggered. So I started balancing short cooldown skills to boost my stagger damage and save my hardest hitting longer cooldown skills for when the down had happened. That way I could actually use skills in such a way that let me interact with the bosses, because there are skills that are not meant to be saved. They're really skills that are for keeping uptime on the bosses or for skill expression. For example, there's one skill where you actually backstep, and if you successfully dodge an attack with the backstep, then the follow-up attack afterwards is empowered. You're not going to use that on something when it's down, so a skill like that really begs to be utilized against enemies actively. That's something you want to use in order to push the stagger down and to just keep pressure on. Because it's just a small period of time between the dodge and the follow-up attack as well, you then get to keep pushing immediately with your various other combos. But that's not the only type of skill that I'm referring to. There are just other short cooldown skills that you may find an opportunity to use. Maybe your next skill will push their stagger bar down to that 50%, which then allows you to Garuda pull them down if you've decided to bring that icon, and then you can follow up with some basic attacks or another short cooldown to reduce the stagger more, and then both of those will be back by the time you actually get the stagger bar to 0. Of course, a lot of this is assuming that you're very comfortable with these style of games, and if you're not comfortable, there's a good chance you're using iconic skills in order to push the stagger bar just to relieve the pressure of having to dodge attacks and having to think too much about the patterns the bosses have. So again, there's just so much expression about how people are going to choose to get through these bosses that the stagger bar just isn't an instant, oh, I'm just going to hit them with my basic attacks and dodge, and when they go down, I'll just use that. Because honestly, it'll take you way longer than trying to incorporate the other skills into your active gameplay. One of my favorite things was the limit break, actually. It greatly increases Clive's output. It's a clear tool that, again, has that same dual functionality, using it in order to push their stagger bar down more quickly or to use it to punish a stagger you've already forced out. But it also has other high skill expression shenanigans, including animation canceling and extended combos. Not to mention bringing stat buffing potions to abuse stagger phases even further. There's just so many things that a player can remember to do or bring in case they're not experienced with this kind of game to make these types of experiences more fun or easy.
Yeah, I think that's a great thing. You know, like it doesn't take anything away from anyone that's going to be playing the game without those like special items that make the game easier, that like auto dodge, auto attack, all that stuff. It doesn't take anything away from you, you know. So like I have absolutely no problem with that, you know. Like that's totally fine that they I wonder like how many people like are like afraid of like the combat system but are like comforted and are deciding to still play the game because they're like, oh, we have this system in here where even if you're not very good, you can still play. Do you know what I mean? I wonder like how many copies are going to be sold because they're including that. I don't know. Like I would assume there's going to be a number, but it's like what, like maybe 10% more sold because they added that in. I'd be interested in knowing that, but like if that was like really going to be worth it for them in the end, because I think a lot of people like maybe they're like afraid of it and they don't like want to do it, but then once they play it, they're going to have enough fun where they're not going to want to have to do those like cheap ways of doing it. But then also, if the game is just legitimately hard, I can see people like defaulting to going back halfway through the game. They're having trouble, so then they go back and then they actually do, you know, use like the items that help you with that stuff. I could see that happening, or they just get sick of playing. Like they're like, I'm just tired. I don't want to do this anymore. I'm just going to put it on the easy mode, basically.
Easier. And on top of that, you still have Torgal. One thing I had to get used to a lot, though, with Torgal, and I didn't mention this earlier, is that Torgal and your items are both the D-pad, but you press left on the D-pad in order to swap between them. So what ends up happening is you kind of have to get used to the idea of which one you have out at any given time. Like, you don't want to have Torgal out and wish you had your potions out because you just got hit by something, and then just spam Torgal abilities because you weren't paying attention.
But what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to put, like so the heal is the right button on the D-pad. So when you switch to your items, your potion's gonna be the right button as well. That's what you should put it as, so that if you accidentally hit Torgal and you're trying to heal, you'll still heal. You know what I mean? So that you should do that. You should have it similar. But yeah, that stuff is hard, and this is the kind of stuff that, like, if you have a keyboard, you can just map it all to the keyboard. But because you're on a controller, it's not that difficult. But like, it does get some, like, really got to like have muscle memory and be only playing this game. You can't be playing like 13 different games and come back to this game and think that you're gonna like seamlessly like remember to hit that button to switch over to Torgal to do the sick or the ravage or whatnot. But yeah, it's all good though.
Flip side, you don't want to be on items and then want to tell Torgal to do something, but you forgot to swap over. So that was something that actually took a little bit extra, I suppose, brain power to get used to in the really short time that we had. And I think that is something that people will probably make mistakes with, but it's just one of those things that once you have enough time, you get used to it, or you establish your gameplay style enough that you determine that one or the other is probably more important to you at all times. It's funny because this isn't the gameplay breakdown video, and I still had all of that to say. I mean, I'm just excited to talk about it. Like, Final Fantasy 16 is a game I have had my eye on for so long. The opportunity to play it ahead of time, to experience these core elements, it's just, and sorry for the pun, it's just ignited a fire in me that it just can't stop thinking, and I've had to be quiet about it since playing it with all of this pent up and built in. And it's not even to mention, like, I didn't even talk about how the game looks beautiful. It runs well. I did play it in performance mode, but it looked good and played well in performance mode. So that's all I can really ask for. The music, oh my goodness. You're not ready. I mean, even if you've heard Soken's work before, the composer Masayoshi Soken, I still don't think you're ready for what your ears are going to hear. Even the trailers don't do some of the themes that we got to hear justice. Like, not that they sound bad there, but when you're experiencing them actively in the game, it is on a whole nother level. The environments are varied and fun, and the stage aspect actually gives you this sense of change. Like, you go from like one stage that's it's actually a city, and then you have one stage that's out in the woods and one stage that's a swampy marsh. So you have all these different varying environments on top of the field areas, one that we got to experience and ones that we've seen in the previews that they've given us earlier, like the YouTube videos and whatnot. And it's what I wanted. It's everything that I wanted. And the only sad thing about it is I know at some point I'll have beaten it, and I'll just want to play it again, and I'll just be like, I just want to experience it for that. I already want to experience the beginning for the first time again, and maybe I'll have that feeling when I actually get to play it when it actually releases.
It's gonna be a good time.
I guess that's where I'll wrap that up, because now I'm just emotional and rambling. But yeah, I'm excited. That's the end of the video.
All right, end of the video. Awesome. That sounds great. I'll link the video for you guys, so I don't feel so bad for stealing this guy's video for content. That's sweet, guys. I want to watch another one real quick. So, because IGN and like I did GameSpot. So GameSpot, whichever one's shorter, I'll watch. So 8:46, 8:44. God dang. All right. So IGN wins because theirs is 8:44. Let's see what IGN has to say.
Final Fantasy 16 opens with a bang. Two swirling icons, the colossal beasts that series fans will know better as summons, pepper each other with fireballs and lash out with their hefty tails as they descend deep under the earth in a scene reminiscent of Gandalf's plunging tussle with the Balrog. It's a level of spectacle rarely witnessed in a video game, and an early indicator of the huge scale story awaiting those venturing into Square Enix's latest. Having played the following 4 or so hours, it's a promise largely lived up to, with razor-sharp combat and thrilling boss battles consistently exciting. But beyond the blade, it also engages through its thoroughly fantasy-rooted tale, establishing the world of Phalisthea, its factions, and individual personalities to good effect. It makes for an electrifying opening which, despite being a little cutscene heavy at times, made me wish I didn't have to stop playing.
That's great. That's exciting.
The opening section that I played is described by Square Enix as a special version made for media to experience, and content may differ from the final version. But regardless of if the events presented are identical to the final game or not, don't worry, I won't be spoiling any story details for Final Fantasy XVI, just discussing some of the themes at play and the stage they set. Phalisthea is a world that returns Final Fantasy to its more classic fantasy roots, albeit with heightened cinematic aspirations. It's not afraid to throw spectacle after spectacle your way right from the off. With the early arrival of the
I will admit, I personally don't think cutscenes are like the way of the future for video games. I really like the real time, like where you can stay in control. But like there's so many games that are built today that just like, I mean, and Final Fantasy is one of them where it's like, yeah, cutscenes are cutscenes are the payoff. They're the cherry on top, and when they're done well, they're amazing. And Final Fantasy has some of the best cutscenes ever made. So, heck yeah, man, give me them cutscenes.
Ice icon Shiva onto a dusty battlefield, truly stunning in its execution as she glistens in all her glory. She provides a stark.
Oh, that's Shiva. How weird. That does not look like that didn't look like Shiva to me. Look at that, that's Shiva. It's weird.
Shiva onto a dusty battlefield, truly stunning in its execution as she glistens in all her glory. She provides a stark contrast to her opponent, the stony, monolithic titan who towers over the skirmish between two rival factions below. There's a sheer enormity to the size of these icons that even the likes of old school God of War or Shadow of the Colossus would be jealous of. They may be well-worn reference points for anything vaguely medieval fantasy, but it's hard to ignore the Lord of the Rings and Game of Thrones influences here. The story is rooted in the struggle over the 5 mother crystals that tower over Phalisthea, which are the source of the magic that powers this world. Naturally, the continent's 6 nations are going to want to
she got a vape pen? What is this?
Fight for control of these, and so a constant state of conflict rages on. One of those nations is the Grand Duchy of Rosaria, and you play as Clive Rosfield, son of the ruling Archduke. Over the course of the opening few hours, you're transported through different periods of his life as the personal catalyst for his story is revealed. It's not a revolutionary setup for a story in this genre, but one introduced with a fair amount of elegance in an early cadence that maintains a good balance between action and dialogue. This pace and a general sense of excitement are infinitely aided by the superb score that soundtracks the events too. It's worth saying at this point that Final Fantasy XVI's opening hours are very story heavy, and while it does a great job at introducing Clive's family ties and those who aim to unbind them, it did leave me wishing I was playing a more active part.
So that's the Shiva. So this color right here is like the color of Shiva. Obviously, it's not. This isn't insane, but like that, I really like that like jade kind of like greenish hue instead of just like a straight up blue. It's like a very nice, subtle, like beautiful color. I really like it. And so this is the girl when she grows up. She's the one fighting with you with like the more like rapier looking sword that has like the like Shiva's powers. That's cool. And then I believe this is the little brother, and I think he has like the Phoenix powers. And then you as Clive have like Ifrit's powers.
Art in it at times.
But apparently you can use everyone's powers in the game. I don't know how that works. That's going to be interesting to find out how they make that make sense.
Not least because when you do get let off the leash, its combat never fails to impress. That heightened sense of cinema translates equally well to the battlefield, with each encounter feeling like a real event. In my relatively short amount of playtime, I fought no fewer than 8 bosses, each delivering spectacle on both a macro and micro level, ranging from massive.
Dude, in 4 hours he fought 8 bosses. That's a boss every 30 minutes. That's what I'm talking about.
massive monster clashes to time-bending perfect parry affairs against agile enemies. The first extensive stretch of gameplay sees you playing as teenage Clive, as you venture through a swampy marshland littered with the most goblin-looking goblins you've ever seen. It culminates in a very fun fight against this world's version of the classic Final Fantasy enemy Morble, a slimy, tendrilled set of teeth with a serious case of bad breath.
Keep clear of its maw, my lord. That thing's breath is worse than its bite.
It's Final Fantasy XVI's first real display of its fantastic combat in full flow, with its signature cinematic strikes and evades now fully introduced to your arsenal. It's a set of tools that is steadily added to as you progress, with different magic abilities welcomed into the fold. And while I had plenty of toys to play with, I still feel like I barely scratched the surface of what these combat systems have to offer. That's a
Oh, let's look at that real quick.
these combat systems have to
Okay. HP. We all know what that is. Attack. I think we can surmise what that means. Defense, stagger. Okay, so you have a. I wonder if that's your stagger bar or if that's like how much you like affect their stagger bar. Your attack probably affects their stagger bar. I don't. So this is probably your own stagger. Probably, right? Strength. Okay. Vit. Okay. And then will. Okay, that's probably magic. Okay.
to offer. That's especially true when it comes to its showpiece kaiju-like icon battles, which flip the script when it comes to gameplay, each promising a delve into a new genre. The aforementioned opening exchange between two fiery icons, which played more like a flying rail shooter than an RPG, conjures up welcome memories of the finale to Nier Automata in its desire to frequently switch up gameplay styles while never pausing for breath. As large-scale as Final Fantasy XVI can be at times, I was slightly surprised by how contained some of its levels can be. Early on at least, they were all relatively narrow locations that funnel you from arena to arena, with occasional forays off the beaten path that rewarded me with useful items. A great example of this is the Greatwood area, which acted as the final destination of my hands-on. A verdant green forest, it largely consists.
You know, one thing that I'm noticing is I have not seen a mini map. I wonder if that's just like they don't want you to see the mini map, like so like in this version of the build, there's no mini map, or if they legitimately don't have a mini map. That's kind of interesting. I wonder what that's going to be. He said Nier Automata, I'm sold. That's it. Walking away, that's it. I'm sold. Yeah. Well, he said that scene with like Phoenix. He said it like reminded him of the finale of Nier Automata. I haven't played Nier Automata, so I don't know what that is. But if you have, I'm sure you know what that means. I'm sure there's something at the end. But yeah, it's super cinematic and epic like that. It's, you know, it's like God of War, Shadow of the Colossus. Like crazy looking, like just cinematic epic battles, man. It looks great, man. It looks good.
Consisted of leafy corridors connecting fights with feisty flora and fauna to bosses of varying sizes. The most notable of these being the scaly giant Fafnir, which looked like something on an exchange trip from Skull Island.
Not so tough.
You'd better hope so.
I did spend a small amount of time in a much wider open space from later in the game, containing side quests and challenging foes to take down, but this by no means felt like the open world Final Fantasy that fans have become accustomed to of late in Final Fantasy 15. This isn't necessarily a bad thing. Not every game needs to be a sprawling world to get lost in, and in some ways, it was a refreshing throwback to the more linear Final Fantasy of old, even if it did feel a little restricted to a repetitive rhythm of cutscene, battle, cutscene.
You just say more linear Final Fantasy old? What is he talking about? What Final Fantasy is linear and doesn't have an open world? Like 12, 13, and like all of them have open worlds. What is the guy talking about?
Battle with exploration coming at a premium. There's nothing old school about.
Right, yeah, 10 and I mean 12 does, I guess, yeah. But 10 and 13, those aren't old. Those are the new Final Fantasies.
About the combat though, which feels sharply cutting edge in its fluidity. The fast-paced action really is excellent. So good in fact that I found myself often thinking, just let me do it more. As I said, cutscenes make up a lot of Final Fantasy XVI's early runtime, and while story has always been a big part of the series, I think it may be the sheer speed of its action that leads to the transition between combat and the slower dialogue heavy scenes, delivering more whiplash this time around. The scenes themselves are all well acted and admirably succinct in their exposition. It's just more of a testament to the sheer thrill of its combat than anything, that I couldn't wait for them to move along at an even swifter pace.
You are a true shield of the flame, and let no one tell you otherwise.
Thank you.
Including me.
For those that really want to take their time and delve deeper into the history
Sir
of
Wade.
Valisthea, however, there's the handy active time lore system. This essentially acts in a similar fashion to Prime Video's X-ray feature, allowing you to hit a button and pause the scene at any moment to learn more about the characters speaking or the terminology they're using. It's a
Oh, that's
smart way to
cool.
provide extra context for those who want it, without overloading on exposition for those who just want to zip along to the next fight. That's not to say
cool.
that Final Fantasy XVI doesn't entertain in its slower moments, and indeed some of them are effective in building Clive out as a protagonist to care about.
And then this is the guy that has Ramuh's powers.
He's an emotionally complicated character plagued with a tragic backstory that adds a welcome amount of depth. A section where you're set loose to roam around his family home of Rosalith Castle serves as a great way of introducing us to Clive and his place in this world, as he
Yeah. This totally reminds me of like when I was gonna say Winterholm. Is it Winterholm? It reminds me of like the winter place in Game of Thrones, or just it just reminds me of like a Game of Thrones castle. Man, this is great.
He interacts with soldiers in training, magical gardeners, and a bounty of regional British accents. From what I've seen so far, the future looks very bright for Final Fantasy XVI. If its opening few hours of hulking icon showdowns, superb melee combat, and story that delivers on both a personal and global level are anything to go by, then a very fun time is on the horizon. I'm hopeful that the ever so stuttering pace irons itself out over the hours to come, with its ferociously fun gameplay taking precedence as Clive's journey broadens. I went into my time with Final Fantasy XVI incredibly excited about what I'd seen in its many trailers and showcases, and left very happy that very little of that anticipation had diminished by the time I'd finished.
Good boy.
For more from Final Fantasy XVI, check out the latest trailer, and for everything else, stick with IGN.
It's pretty cool. What can I say, guys? It's pretty freaking cool.